So I'm in a bit of a bind here when it comes to the episode progression in this review series. Obviously, I've not been doing this exactly chronologically, more of a general guideline than a rigid plan. So while it makes sense for me to do this episode from the perspective that we've been studying the Restorians, there's one episode that would provide key context for a lot of the emotional beats of the story. So I'm hoping that my assessment is on point and that this story can hold its own emotionally without falling back there. But we'll get to that episode, The Mathematics of Tears, soon. This episode also has two related distinctions. This is the first episode where, as we mentioned in the series' introduction, Andromeda would tap Stargate actors for their guest stars, to work around their limited budget restrictions on reshoots. And, tied into that, this is the episode where Lexa Doig and Michael Shanks met each other, the two eventually marrying and, shockingly enough for Hollywood, are still married to this day, and in fact working together as recently as last year. Which certainly puts them in contention for geek power couple. It's just always nice to see real-life happy endings derived from fiction. Our episode starts off with Andromeda leading adrift Scheherazade, who is the newest signatory to the Commonwealth Charter. Trance and Harper are singing some kind of drinking song, but its lyrics are about the Commonwealth, but implicate it was written after the fall, leaving some to speculate that Scheherazade is something of a Commonwealth remnant that has lost most of its traditions, technology, well, basically everything except their enthusiasm to partay. Dylan and Becca are called to command, though. A passenger ship is under attack by Restorians. The Andromeda moves to intercept, but she's too little too late, and the civilians are killed by the Restors. Wow, that's a downer for the teaser.
It's nearly impossible to defend against an assassin who's willing to die for his cause.
Agreed. There's only one way to deal with terrorists. Locate their base of operations and destroy them.
I love that answer, Captain Hunt.
There is, however, one escape pod detected in the debris. The survivor identifies himself as Gabriel, and he's an AI, like Rami. Harper finds a lot of processing power in his brain.
Wow! You got larger chips coming out the quintaflop. What are you, some kind of robot brain scientist rocket surgeon thing?
No. I was a teacher.
Of course, there's love at first sight, because, stay with your own kind? Not a great message, granted. Gabriel notes that there are no ship avatars anymore. They haven't been built since the fall. Rami is quite clearly smitten with Gabriel's charm. Okay, I don't dislike this romance, but there's a hint of, I guess grooming is the closest word for it, as much as that applies to a robot. That'll become clearer as the episode goes on why I feel that way, so I'll save those points for a little later. And this is when the Andromeda is approached by 3 ships, a law enforcement fleet under contract to the Free Trade Alliance.
Incoming transmission.
Andromeda Ascendant. This is FTA Enforcement Wing 159er.
My future ex-wife.
Heard you were tangling with Restors. Want some help?
They come bearing gifts for Dylan's expedition now that the Restorians are threatening a new signatory to the Commonwealth. Schematics on the Restorian flagship. This is Chura and Chaco, and the space pirate anime influence is strong in them. It doesn't take a big imagination to see this little crew of pilots as anime characters. They're quite helpful though, and they offer Dylan info on the base of operations.
It's a Commonwealth ship. What, do you think this is the only high-guard relic still tooling around out there? Over in Achira 3, they got a Shimmering Diamond-class troop transport rebuilt as a casino.
This is no retrofit. It's a fully armed Siege Perilous-class destroyer.
Siege Perilous. Sounds friendly.
They weren't really going for friendly.
Really?
Gabriel and Rami have a good conversation. Gabriel admires Rami, lamenting he is little more than a walking, talking thumb drive, able to absorb data and spit it back out. But Rami is a fully functional avatar, and Gabriel is touched that she came to see him and is concerned for his welfare, with a very quaint exchange that sums up the themes of the episode.
You are going into combat and you are worried about my safety.
It's part of my programming.
No, it is part of your personality. You are a person, you know, despite the circuitry. Quite an amazing person.
I'm a warship with a mission to complete.
We get to see the other half of this implicit racism as Dylan and Rami talk over allowing Gabriel to help them. Dylan thinks Rami has feelings for him. which might complicate the mission. Rami pleads that she be allowed to keep, feeling emotions. Would Dylan really be this concerned if it was Becca who was flirty with someone in Gabriel's position? Well, that kind of gets at the thorn in this episode. Rami is, well...
This is not in my performance specs. I'm supposed to be a warship, not a lovesick schoolgirl.
The geometry is depressingly familiar.
A triangle. The unattainable captain on one side, the charismatic newcomer on the other.
Stop talking about me as if I'm not here. Both of you.
And lovesick schoolgirl is an apt descriptor. Given a full range of emotions, now Rami is forced to process and confront them head-on, which I think is where that vaguely groomy aspect of this relationship comes into play. Rami has no emotional experience. Compare this with Gabriel, who has been running for centuries, and it's hard not to see something even unintentionally exploitative about this relationship. For example, children who get groomed into relationships like this often grow out of it in their mid-20s, as those rose-colored lenses drop and they realize their abuser is not the only person who can show them compassion and love and understands them. And it doesn't help that Gabriel literally pulls the stunts of child groomers.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that.
No, I liked it.
On the flip side, Gabriel is quite literally the only other person who really can understand Rami. He's the first sapient AI that she's come into contact with in a proper physical sense, separated by data. Rami has interacted with old Commonwealth AI this season, but never had to develop a working relationship with them as equals. This is a very new experience for her, and it's responsible to let her play that out on her own time. These concerns get worse later once we see who Gabriel is, and immediately after, we see him sending a coded message to the Balance of Judgment. One thing we should observe about Harper is that while his initial response is jealousy, as soon as Andromeda points out everyone else is allowed to have relationships with their own kind, his expression makes clear that he knows he's done fucked up. His stance after this is strictly from the protective side, as he is able to quash his personal jealousy and do what's best for Rami. For all the shit Harper gets from the crew for being a horny schoolboy, he is more emotionally mature than, well, most people tend to be in this situation. The Restorians attack, and the Andromeda's defense systems are offline. Convenient. Dylan already knows who to blame. The Andromeda is saved by the FTA freebooters. But as soon as they open their comms, missiles zero in on the frequency. It's the Judgment, laying in wait to open fire. The Allies retreat, but Shura is killed. But it's time for the big reveal.
You're everything Dylan was afraid you might be. A rester! A spy for the Balance of Judgment!
I wish it were that simple. The truth is, I am the Balance of Judgment. I am the ship's avatar, just like you. And if you don't let me go, I will destroy you.
This is where the complicated issues of AI and Andromeda come into play. Faced with the universe in chaos after the fall, the Balance of Judgment carried on in the only way he knew how. War. The Judgment is a ship killer. And that was all it knew how to do, so oath to the Commonwealth in hand, it continued. And continued.
Fighting off raiders, destroying slave ships. First it was pirates, then poachers, then strip miners. Centuries of tiny little steps bringing him here.
To destroy the Andromeda.
You have to believe I would never hurt Andromeda, not of my own free will. I love her.
Oh, please, don't make me puke.
Gabriel does seem conflicted, but as he says, he cannot refuse a direct command from his ship. This is part of the complexity. While we see Dylan's suspicion of Rami's functionality as a bit racist, on the flip side we have seen what an AI untended goes to, and there are specific limitations that AI are slaves to that an organic would not be. And when the crew engage the Judgment, we see just how far a free AI can go.
The duty of the High Guard is to protect the Commonwealth from invaders. from despoilers, from profiteers and looters, and the dregs of the galaxy overrunning the stars.
And you think the only way to do that is to join the Restors?
I didn't join the Restorians. I founded the Restorians.
But Dylan's surprise attack is thwarted, an attack not even Tyr knew about. Andromeda starts taking fire again, which is when Dylan rushes to where Rami and Gabriel are. Rami has been infected. She's broadcasting all her operating functions to the Judgment unbeknownst to herself. Again, a slave to her own body's nature, muddying the issue of personhood. Here, she had to be shut down for the good of everyone, including herself. The crew are forced to abandon the Andromeda, taking to the Maru to attempt one last sneak attack. Dylan's loaded the cargo pod with missiles, but using inertia, he's going to let them glide towards the Judgment like mine. The ensuing damage is enough to take out a crewless hulk like the Judgment. Now free, Gabriel invites Rami to elope with him, basically, but the happy wedding has to be cancelled. Before the Judgment was destroyed, it transmitted a copy of its core personality to Gabriel.
And you'll be a warship again. And warships only know how to do one thing.
Only one thing.
I love you.
Gabriel dies, his last words, the last spark of his personality. Remarkable. Returning to that theme of Rami being a teenager, she isn't able to process the grief. But more than that, she sees a pattern with the other High Guard AI she's dealt with. We'll get to one of those next time, but the grief, mixed with the fear, really stirs in her. Some think Doi goes a little hammy with this, but for me, it's just the right amount for someone with Rami's emotional maturity.
We're killers. We're attack dogs. And I'm afraid the Balance of Judgment went insane. The Pax Magellanic went insane, and I don't want that to happen to me.
Dylan talks her down, which is good because we need Rami. But there is one line that sticks with me this episode, and it's the first one I think of when I remember this episode in particular.
Does it get any better? Does the pain go away?
I don't think it's supposed to. It's part of what it means to be alive.
This is a mixed episode for me. The two plots, while interwoven, so play like a traditional A and B plot, separated and running separate tracks, until the very last minute when they collide. If you can divorce yourself from some of the creepy elements of their relationship, which again is hard considering Gabriel is literally a honeypot in this situation, the romance between Rami and Gabriel actually works quite well. Gabriel is naturally very charismatic, an eloquent scholar who is clearly smitten by Rami, and Rami's ability to flex her individuality comes into focus this episode. Rami, following this incident, will tend to be much more independent and take less of Tyr's shit than she has until this point. The chemistry between our romantic leads, however, is what sells it. And as mentioned, that chemistry literally led to a 20-year marriage, so it's pretty natural and very effective. As far as the Restors go, they remain the weak link in their own episode. Shura and Chaco are interesting, but because the romance plot needs to suck up all the screen time, there's basically no time left to let the other guest stars shine. Poe doesn't even get a speaking line in the final cut. But the combat is pretty clever, and this last climax before the finale, after the following episode's bottle show, of the Andromeda going head-to-head with another High Guard remnant is a suitably exciting battle story. For these reasons, I'm going to label this recommended viewing, but like all Great Neptune's Ocean, it's just barely on the border of optional. It's not, strictly speaking, unnecessary, but there's a lot of AI-right stuff here, at the least, which will come into play in later episodes. So let's talk about the Restorians, the Season 1 arc villains of Andromeda. The Restors are a mixed bag. Founded by the Balance of Judgment roughly 3 to 4 years before the series starts, the Restors believe that sapient life is destroying the galaxy, so they choose to correct this problem by destroying any interstellar travel. The biggest problem with the Restorians are the way they are characterized. That is, very inconsistently. Let's look at their first outing, D-0. The Restors here are never even identified as the Restors. They say nothing. They just want to kill the Andromeda, and when they fail, they self-destruct to conceal their identity. It's a pretty chilling, effective introduction to them on the whole. Watching this very small warship outfight the gargantuan Andromeda time and time again, through clever tactics and their sheer tenacity to never give up the chase, like a horror movie killer, attacking and attacking, never giving up until they're dead. The problem is, the Restorians are terrorists. Terrorists are not quiet, subtle, or enigmatic. They shout their demands to anyone who will listen and take credit for basically anything that could serve their own ends, even if they didn't do it. To that end, their characterization is more believable in The Ties That Blind, where they are generally quiet, other than to shout and announce their identity and intents, and, frankly, untrained freedom fighters who fall for a pretty easy trick, not the ruthless killers from D-0. This doesn't even necessarily have to be bad, but a lot of that was on star-crossed to marry the two identities. It could have been done, maybe, if the Restorians were some sort of front meant to guard a bigger secret that the Balance of Judgment was working on. That could resolve this discrepancy. The first ship we found could have been one of the Balance of Judgment's elite guard, while the cannon fodder from The Ties That Blind were your typical grunts. The Restors could have been established as many different groups who have united under a common cause. That would have made it even more thematic that the Balance of Judgment used its skills as a negotiator and diplomat of the Commonwealth days to unite several bad guys into this anti-Commonwealth. Or, could be the reverse. The Free Trade Alliance might just slap anyone who disagrees with them with the Restor label. Regardless of their motivation, it's just easier to dismiss them that way. But none of these things happened, so we're left with a wildly uneven antagonist who often plays like an afterthought in their own episodes. So I have my own theory, but no confirmation on this. Seeing as D-0 was the pilot, the bad guys were probably left unnamed intentionally as not to complicate the pitch to the suits. They probably didn't have a concept other than genetic baddies. They were then retroactively identified as Restorians, perhaps by necessity as the show's budget limitations were coming into focus, thus being forced to reuse the stealth destroyer model sooner than they expected. They were stapled onto D-0 here to compensate. This explains why the hasty explanation that Tyr fits the attack in Episode 4 to the Om Shanti attack wasn't given a pass-over for how it made sense. It was forced to convey the information to us, much in the same way the Restorians are then forced to convey their presence to the Andromeda, leaving those breadcrumbs on purpose. It's the only explanation how they could leave a calling card on a fake attack to deliberately antagonize the Andromeda crew. That's not necessarily an excuse, of course. Just because you are forced to do something in show business is not an excuse to do it badly. Look at Tyr for the polar opposite. On the whole, it's good that we were already introduced to the Shadow Man by this point in the series, because the Restorians were, sadly, poorly realized foes. Now we can double back and deal with more of that AI stuff that will mirror Rami's journey this episode.
The day of the battle.
What about me?
I need you here. I need you here. I need you here. I need you here.
You don't belong here. You don't belong here. Get out of me.
Love is merely a trick the DNA plays to replicate itself.
I don't have DNA.
My point exactly. Are the two of you planning to procreate?
Will there be a nursery full of little grab sleds and data disks?
Cynic.
Well said. You should consider a career as a therapist.
My first professional recommendation, focus on your work. And stop worrying about your life-sized love doll.